Hello and welcome to Playwire Live. I am Ashleigh Respicio. I'm the Director of Partner Success Operations at Playwire. And today we are talking all things brand strategy with co-founder and Chief Storytelling Officer at Demeter Media. I hope I got that right, but you can correct me. Catherine Connors, welcome. And I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell our viewers a little bit about you and what you do.
Thank you, Ashleigh. It's so much fun to be in conversation with you. I'm excited for this. As you said, I'm the co-founder and chief storytelling officer of Demeter Media, but you can call it Demeter. It's named after the goddess that saved her daughter from Hades. There's the story of Demeter and Persephone. So ancient Greek we don't need to fuss with. I also former head of content editor in chief from Disney Interactive, and a long time strategist and even participant in the creator space. I got my start as a creator myself and built a media business out of it, which was the start of my path to the Walt Disney Company and to everything that I've done ever since. And as you know, and as we're going to discuss, I'm deeply passionate about brand storytelling, especially for creators.
Yes, we're super excited. I'm super excited to talk to you about this. Thank you. And I figured we could get started with just an intro of, what is a brand strategy? Why is it important? How publishers, maybe just start with those two, and then we can kind of talk further into how one builds one.
Yeah, I think, brand is one of those concepts like content or design that is both everybody feels like they understand what it is, but nobody's quite sure what it is, right? It's very easy for the idea of brand strategy, brand identity to get really slippy, especially for publishers for whom brand can feel it's just synonymous with their site, right? With their platform. And so there's sometimes a bit of slippage between brand strategy and just simple brand identity. And usually there should be strategy that goes into brand identity, but it's very easy when you're a publisher, influencer, or creator to just fall into the comfort of your identity, your personal identity or your site identity being your brand, right?
Yeah.
And you can get a lot of success by having an organically cultivated brand that's associated with whatever kinds of stories that you're telling online, whatever kind of content you're producing. But ideally, you're putting some strategy behind it. That is to say, you're thinking tactically about not just what your brand organically has evolved to be, but what you really want your brand identity to be. What is the story you want to be telling to your audience and to your community, and where is that story taking you? Like, where is your brand? Not just what's the force of your brand in the current moment, but what's the path that you want your brand to be on? Do you want to look forward to a horizon where your brand becomes much bigger and more complex? Do you want to stay on the path that you're on and just continue to refine it, to hone it? All of these things require some strategic thinking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you find in general for those that kind of start in the creator, or they've built a website and suddenly it's become everything that they do and it's become their brand, is there a certain point in time that they should start thinking about brand strategy? If they haven't in the beginning, they've kind of just gone along with the identity. At what point, or are there factors that show the publisher that they should start to then build a strategy around it?
Sure. Well, the best time is yesterday. The second best time is now. It's never too soon to be thinking about brand strategy. That said, often, for a publisher, creator, influencer, especially the ones that really develop organically, and there's some force and power to organically developing a brand. And it's, if you think about a standard publisher origin story where they have something that they're passionate about and they begin creating content around that passion online, they begin to cultivate an audience, and it's coming out of a real interest or passion, something that they're deeply committed to. And a brand evolves in relationship to their creative output and to their relationship with their audience. And that can be really, really powerful because the organic nature of that brand development is such that it's responsive. The publisher is doing what works. And even if I can stand over here as a brand strategist and say, put some strategy to it, there's something really powerful about the brand. It's why publishers can be so extraordinarily successful as
Right.
media platforms, because they're following their instincts and their intuition, and that is not to be underestimated. Brand strategy becomes a factor when a publisher, creator, or influencer wants to think about how much control they want to have over it, right? What do they want to do with it? Is the brand identity that they've organically cultivated tracking to what their goals and ambitions are, what their 3-5 year plan is, what their wildest blue sky dreams are? Are they on a landscape that they are defining and controlling themselves? And is their brand identity helping this? It's also, the other point in time in which or a way of thinking about the timing of this is sort of at the moment when a publisher starts to think, oh, there's something much bigger here, right? Than just posting content online, right? When I would say the moment when you recognize I'm doing something professional here. Like I've
Right.
created something. I'm a media company, even if it's a tiny one. I have built a brand. The minute you start to recognize that you've built a brand, built an identity, that you have a persona, whatever the language is that you're using, that's when you want to start to think, okay, how do I make this work for me?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What would be the first thing you would recommend once a publisher realizes, okay, I need a strategy. It's time to get serious. What are kind of the first initial steps of putting a brand strategy together?
Well, the very first and most important step is getting clear on what your brand actually is. And this might seem like a duh, right? And it also might seem like something that you expect one already knows, right? But you'd be surprised, if I'm, say, a food publisher and say I have built a brand identity around really, really delicious baked goods.
hmm
I might simply think that I have an identity as a family friendly, baking site, but one of the things I'd want to start doing is going, okay, is the identity associated with me, the person, or is it associated with, have I built, have I built a platform that doesn't rely as much on my personality? Maybe it's just a hands and pans kind of content play.
Yeah.
So asking like, am I the brand, or have I already organically built something that's bigger than me or that I'm kind of sitting behind? And then asking yourself, like, how would I describe my brand to someone else? There's an exercise that businesses and startups often do called a PR FAQ. It's like a public relations frequently asked questions. And it's an exercise of asking yourself, if I were going to be interviewed tomorrow, right, about my business, what are the points that I would need to hit on? How would I describe it succinctly? What am I offering? And, when I've worked with publishers and creators and influencers and startups, one of the exercises I suggest people go through is like, just write yourself a PR FAQ, write yourself a little bullet list of like, if, Taylor Lorenz calls you up tomorrow and wants to do an interview on like the next great like food influencer, or the New York Times has gotten excited about what you're doing and somebody reaches out and says, I want to interview you. Ideally, if anyone does that, awesome, congratulations, but do make notes.
Yep.
Don't go in cold. Go through the exercise of saying, well, what will I say? How will I describe my brand? How will I describe what I do? How will I describe what my audience responds to? That's a critical piece of this, right?
Yeah.
Getting some clarity when you're trying to get your hands around what actually is your brand. You want to look at not just what you would tell people, but also, if someone from your audience or your community was asked, who is this creator, cookie lady, right?
Yeah. Yes.
How would they describe you? That way you're getting a sense of like what the actual story is that you're working with. And then you can start to think about, do I want to change this? Do I want to adapt this? How do I want to improve this? Where do I want to take this?
Yeah. And do you find that when you're working with brands, have they, or influencers or publishers that are starting to think about this strategy, did they try to create a strategy on their own where they found like they really need an external viewpoint to help them pull the strategy out? Or is it possible to do, like for me to do for my own brand successfully?
Oh, you can absolutely do it successfully on your own. You don't need me,
Mhm.
right? Most people don't need a brand
Mhm.
consultant or a strategist or a is somebody that's going to come in from the outside as an expert to help them.
Okay.
It's great if you do,
Yeah.
right? And there's a reason why the Disneys and Nikes and Apples of the world have whole teams dedicated to brand, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it's there's an art to it. But for your average publisher, they've probably gotten a long way on their own already, and it's pretty straightforward to begin developing your own brand strategy. And there's tons of resources out
Mhm.
there, right? If you
Right.
just Google brand strategy, ask ChatGPT, like,
Right.
you'll come up with a lot of resources. But it is as basic as it's just fundamental storytelling. It's
Mhm.
asking simple, basic questions. That's why I use the example of the FAQ. What's your list of bullet points you would explain in an interview? It's just asking, what's my story? What's the story of my platform? Is my story reaching the right audience? And
Mhm.
when you think about where it's useful to have an external point of view, as I said, the most important external point of view is your audience's
Mhm.
point of
Right.
view. Who do they think you are? How would they describe you? Why do they come to your site or to your platform again and again? And thinking of yourself as being, it doesn't have to be actually, you don't need to be going out and asking them. It can be a thought experiment, but considering yourself as being in dialogue and conversation with your audience always and being aware of how are you being received, that's something that really only involves your attention
Mhm.
and your imagination.
Mhm. So, one thing that just came to mind, if you, and you've worked with a lot of influencers and brands, if you go through the exercise of beginning to create a strategy and you realize you actually might need to pivot, like
Mhm.
how would you navigate a pivot to what your long term, or if I was the influencer, my long term, what goals would be if I've gone down one path, say I'm like hands recipe person, but I want my face to now
Yeah.
be the brand. How do you navigate that so semi successfully?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say there's a sort of like a question that precedes a little bit is like, how
Mhm.
do you know if you need to pivot or if you want to pivot? And those
Right.
might be related things or they might be different things. You might want to pivot because you want to expand, your content interests are expanding, or you realize you have a goal that you want to take you beyond what you're already doing. Or you might be looking at like your stats, right? You might be
Mhm.
looking at your numbers, you might be looking at your business situation and going, I think I need to do something to zhuzh things up. Or I might need to notice if something's not working that
Right.
I want to fix. So you want to ask yourself why you would pivot. And pivot doesn't necessarily mean going in a completely different direction. It can
Mhm.
mean like just shifting a teeny little bit. It can mean just like tweaking things a little bit. To your point of the example of like, what if I'm a food publisher who wants to go from like hands and pans and being sort of anonymous as a personality to being like, the next Bobby Flay or Martha Stewart or
Right.
like personality,
Yeah.
then you kind of have your answer right there. You can build your strategy out of that strategic move. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
I've got a brand identity and story right now that's about cookielady.com, but I don't have a cookie lady, like I don't have a Catherine with the cookie lady, right?
Right.
So you would shift, as carefully and intentionally as you could to like, what do I need to do to start positioning myself more fully as a brand that has a human being at the
Mhm.
center,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I say carefully because I think sometimes we want to, um, especially if we feel like I need to make a change or I'm feeling really inspired and I've realized I have a different goal, it can be very tempting to want to like leap into it. But brands, like the best brands in the world, are very carefully
Mm.
built, right? And they're
Mhm.
very carefully tended to. Again, Disney is my background, so like I often use that as an
Yeah.
example. Like part of the force of the Disney brand is that it's so consistent, right? And
Mhm.
every time they tweak something or change something or expand, like into superheroes or into sports or what have you, they're making sure that anything they're doing is consistent with the thing that already works. And so as a publisher, you always want to be asking yourself, am I avoiding throwing the baby out with the bathwater? I want to preserve whatever it is that's gotten me to where I am, and I want to build on it, and I want to shift it, and I want to tweak it, but I want to be careful to recognize what's already working for me. Because if you're in a position where you're considering brand pivots to become the next Martha Stewart, you're
Hmm.
doing something right already. It's just a question of asking yourself, okay, what do I need to do to get to the next place? And again, it comes down to storytelling. I've got
Right.
this story now. What would it take to shift the story slightly or, more than slightly to accommodate where I want to go?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So for our larger brands, that the established brands that have worked on a brand strategy, they have the one that they've gone through the exercise, they've been working the strategy for some time. How often should a brand revisit the strategy or audit it to improve it? Is there kind of guidelines around maintaining a strategy, or is it varies?
It varies. There aren't any hard and fast rules. It would be great if there are. I
Mhm.
would say that, I mean, you want to be obviously paying attention to what you're doing.
Right.
So, and this tracks to the question we discussed a moment ago of like, how do I know if I need to pivot or if I want to pivot? You want to treat your platform as a business, and I'm guessing that everyone watching this already is treating it as a business.
Mhm.
And so you want to have a regular cadence of reviewing the health of your business. Your brand is core to your business. So you want to be asking, as you look at your business, am I growing at a rate that I want to? Am I driving the revenue that I want to? Am I on pace to my goals? Do I have new goals? Am I rethinking my goals? Every time you're doing that, you want to be asking yourself, how is my brand supporting this? What could my brand be doing better to support this? What might I do with my brand? Because remember, brand is its identity, its story, it's your relationship with your audience. It's the thing that draws people to you. So
Mhm.
every time you're doing any kind of assessment about the health of your business, whether it's part of a regular cadence of assessing the health of your business, or it's in response to, oh, I've noticed like a dip in
Mhm.
something,
Right.
right? Or I see an opportunity, or I had an amazing dream last night where I integrated fashion into my food platform. That's when you want to say, okay, what must I do with this? What can I do with this? What could I do with this?
Right.
And begin thinking strategically about it.
Okay. Going back to reviewing performance and metrics, are there any key indicators or metrics that you tend to look at to see the health of a brand? Like
Yeah.
what would one look at to understand their brand health?
Yeah, the things that you wanna look at when you wanna understand the health of your brand is your engagement
Hmm.
metrics, broadly understood. That is to say, a healthy brand is attracting more than just eyeballs, right? SEO
Right.
can get you eyeballs, right? Anything that is driven by topic interest doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your brand,
Mm.
right? And this is why building a strong brand is so important, because it makes you kind of future proof around changes in technology and algorithms and that sort of thing.
Right.
The more people come to you because of you, whether that's you, the human, or your platform, the healthier your business is going to
Hmm.
be. So looking at just eyeballs, like how are you performing? SEO is obviously important to the vast majority of publishers, but it doesn't tell you a lot about the health of your brand. Now, it doesn't tell you nothing, right? Like if you have a
Right.
strong
Right.
brand, you're probably going to index higher. But if I'm, again, cookielady.com, I'm sorry to, if there's a cookielady.com out there, if I'm getting a large amount, if I'm getting healthy traffic because I index high when people search for cookie recipes,
Mhm.
that's awesome, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have a strong brand. It means that people are coming back again and again and again to my cookie recipes. I've got the right keywords, that sort of thing.
Right.
So what I want to look at as a publisher is like, what are my engagement metrics telling me, right? How much time are people spending on my platform? Like, how much are they engaging? If I have like comments, if I have a community, how much
Mhm.
engagement is happening? If I have affiliate links, how many people are actually clicking through? Like, how are people, to what extent are people doing more than just following a link from somewhere else to see my recipe or to see my top 10 tips or to see my, like guide, like my consumer guide or whatever it is? You want to get a sense of how much people are really interacting with you and engaging with your platform, because that's the much stronger indicator of a healthy brand, right? That they
Right.
found something that they like and they're sticking with you. The other, this counts as well. This is why, it's hard to shake social
Yeah, yeah.
as a funnel. That
Right.
if you have a, if you have a strong engagement funnel via social functions on brand
Mm.
recognition, right? Like
Mhm.
there's some amount of search that happens, in the context of social, but really the power of social is that people gravitate towards brands that they
Mhm.
like, right?
Right.
They gravitate towards voices. And so if you're tracking your, and again, not just number of followers, number of likes, but like who comments, who reacts to you,
Mhm.
who is really interested in your story, and who, because ultimately what we want to do here is to be cultivating loyalty, right? That's the brass ring, is to
Right.
build loyalty so that you've got an audience and a community that when they're thinking about cookie recipes is always coming to you, right? Because they like you, they love your brand, they identify with it, or it represents something aspirational to them, right? It's like
Yes.
that's the thing that gets you that stickiness and gets you that durability, into a future that can be, as we know, uncertain with all sorts of changes to technology and to algorithms and to the movements of platforms.
Yeah, so that like diversifying
Yeah.
and like engaging with your audience on both like within your website but also within social platforms as well, and
Yeah.
looking at their engagement. Is there any, or are there any common mistakes that you see creators or brands make that could possibly hurt their brand or derail their strategy?
Um, the biggest one I think is simply neglect,
Mm,
right?
yep.
It's, this is a thing that you have probably the most control over of anything that you're doing as a content creator, as a publisher, as any sort of business, is you're the author of your story, of your business, your brand story. You have a lot of control over this.
Right.
And I think it's easy, especially like we've just spent like what, 10 to 15 years of SEO really being a extraordinary driver of
Hmm.
traffic to certain kinds of content, right? And it's been the engine behind some really big businesses. But SEO, like any other technology, any other dynamic in media spaces, is uncertain and it's not
Right.
within your control, right?
Hmm.
So if you're dependent, and this goes to your point about diversifying, right? If you're
Hmm.
dependent on any one source of business, you're vulnerable.
Hmm. Right.
Your brand is your single best tool for being effective across diverse business and audience streams. And it doesn't require all that much. It just requires a little bit of attention
Yeah.
and intention. And again, you just need to look at the most successful brands in the world, the big brands like the Disneys, the Nikes, the Apples, right? They're a big part of their success. The bulk of their success is that people love them, right?
Hmm.
They love the
Right.
products, they love the culture, they love the identification, and so they gravitate there, and that creates a lot of business security. If you're not thinking about your brand, then you're missing an opportunity. And it may be that you can survive and even thrive by just having a brand that's sort of organic, developed organically, and you haven't had to put a ton of energy into it.
Hmm.
And if that's true, that's great. There's loads of examples of those out there. But even in those cases, I would say they're missing a bigger opportunity,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like they're only
Hmm.
scratching the surface. And in those cases, you could take, publishers that are strong just on the basis of their SEO and on the basis of getting that kind of content could go stratospheric if they had a strong brand and were able to bring in other streams.
Right.
And then, ones that need a little bit more juice, it's like brand is really your opportunity to make sure that you're not vulnerable to shifts in algorithms and platforms and dynamics and technology, to make sure that you're in control of
Mhm.
your own growth, and also to make sure that you've got like the broadest possible horizon of
Mm.
possibility for your business. If you're in control of your brand, you can decide like I do pivot, right? I move from cookies to charcuterie, right?
Right.
Or from food to lifestyle more broadly, where you can do
Yes.
the thing that you should absolutely be doing if you're a publisher of any sort, if you have any sort of business in content or creation, asking yourself like, what are my wildest and most audacious dreams? Like,
Mhm.
what do I want to do with this like extraordinary business that I've built? The brand is going to get you to those dreams. It's going to get you the partnerships that are going to take you there. It's going to boost your independence and your business stability, and it's going to be the path that gets you to what you really want to create.
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot of really good good stuff that you just shared right there. I was going to ask you as we wrap up, what are like your most important points that you wanted to touch on before we ended, but I don't know if that was it or if you have anything else, but that was really some great nuggets of information.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the two most important pieces of brand advice that I give that are just like free, you can have them, they don't require any further conversation, are the one that I stated earlier of there's it's never too late to get a handle on your brand story, even if you feel you already have one. It's like just
Mhm.
own it, be in control of it, be intentional about it, be really thoughtful about it. That's the first one. The other is like have that be related to what your biggest dreams are.
Mhm.
Dreaming big is one of the best things that you can do as a brand-based business, right? Again,
Yeah.
Nike, Apple, Disney, all the big ones, they're wildly aspirational, also accessible. But they're aspirational because they set big magical goals, right?
Yeah.
Martha Stewart became Martha Stewart because she had a vision of omnimedia. Oprah, any of the big brands, Gwyneth Paltrow, any of the big food brands, they're all big dreams and audacious goals behind these. And the best way for you to supercharge your brand strategy is to tether whatever story you're telling to a big audacious goal, to a big blue sky goal that
Yeah.
you can make actionable by just simply asking yourself, how does my brand story get me there? And how can I refine my brand story and deepen and enrich and expand my brand story to get me there?
Yeah. That great piece of advice, two pieces of advice. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to have you on. I feel like we could talk another half hour, but we we won't do that for now. But I would love for you to share, where people can find you, where you can be reached, whether social or otherwise, so that they can reach out to you if they have any more questions.
Sure. I'm at Her Bad Mother on most of the socials, Instagram, Threads, and Catherine Connors on LinkedIn, and Demeter Media is simply demeter.media.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, it was really great bits of information that you provided. So thank you.
I'm so glad. Anytime.